Welcome everybody to the inaugural episode of the Bone Club. I'm here with Stephanie Hartley and Jenna McCrae, and my name is Ashley Smith, and we'll be your hosts as we journey through the science that is true crime, CSI, death investigation, and the field of forensic anthropology. The goal of this podcast is when we look at the media landscape that is today. You have true crime podcasts that are very popular. You have television shows such as CSI and some of the others. For our, when we were coming up, it was Bones. I never liked the show, but many in my cohorts did. We also have crime novels that seem to be really popular these days in conjunction with the spicy novels. So we see all these different things that talk about death investigation, that talk about, to an extent, forensic anthropology, but there isn't much of a discussion as to what that science is. So you'll read or you'll see or you'll hear on forensic files that the shape of the skull indicated that the person was African American. What does that mean? How did we come up with it? What's the science behind that? That's the goal of this podcast. And we also want to discuss the field of forensic anthropology and what's going on in it. How are things going? How do we do what we do? And how does this field constantly change? And to do that, we have three really good forensic anthropologists, if we do say so ourselves. My name is Ashley Smith. My name is Ashley Smith. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto. I work mainly out of the University of Toronto Mississauga campus, where I teach in the Department of Anthropology and in the Forensic Science program. My PhD is in forensic anthropology, essentially, and I received my Master's of Science degree in 2012 from Boston University, also in forensic anthropology. I'm about 2.5 months from completing my PhD here, and I'm getting ready to go on to the job market. So things are a little bit up in the air. I have, throughout my career, had an extensive record when it comes to both research and cases. So I've worked about 50 different cases over the last decade. And I also do a lot of research, and that research is widely varied. Among some of the stuff that I've had published or is currently under review are things on, say, penetrative trauma and its role in decomposition, or how standardized are our osteometrics, how we measure bones. Looking at the decay of bone proteins and its use as determining the time since death, or how bone cells migrate and how you can use those to determine if an injury occurred when someone died or just after someone died. And my more recent publications and some of the stuff I've been working on now is looking at the field in general. I worked with a collaborative group with about 7 authors looking at how we can incorporate the trans community into forensic anthropology from a casework side, a teaching side, a research side of things. And my current work that I'm working on with Hey Siri, late night. Well, we're going to edit that out. Should have done that before.
That'll make it good. It's funny.
Actually, I may do that. So the stuff I'm currently working on now is trying to address the need for advocacy in forensic anthropology. We as forensic anthropologists tend to see the final end of a lot of marginalized individuals, and yet our field has largely said we are objective. We don't discuss the policies. We don't address the problems, but we have a unique privilege. We need to start doing that. And that leads me to why I came into this field in the first place. Why am I a forensic anthropologist? And I hope Stephanie and Jenna can discuss the same thing. For me, I came into this field because as a trans person, way back in 2009, when I first said, I want to be that, I questioned what would happen to me and how would I be identified if I was found in the woods. And while I tried to get started on in my master's, it didn't really pan out then. It's something I'm starting to shift my focus towards now. So I want to see how we can help to identify trans identified individuals and get them off the rolls of the unidentified. So that's a little bit about my background. Stephanie, what about you?
Hi, yes, everyone. I'm Stephanie Hartley. I am a master's degree forensic anthropologist. I currently work for SNA International supporting the DPA mission, which is pretty much a long acronym, but it is Defense Prisoners of War Missing Action Accounting Agency. We predominantly look at past wars to try to identify the soldiers who went missing. So if you think a plane goes down in Vietnam, someone has to go out and try to find it. That's a lot of what that company does. And I do primarily lab work. So I work day in and day out looking at skeletal cases to try to create that biological profile using things like DNA and isotopes and a bunch of other things to try to come together to create what essentially is a bioprofile or a picture of who that individual was before they died or when they died, and be able to try to accurately ID them. I got my master's degree at the University of West Florida under Alicia Winburn. So if you follow a lot of forensic anthropology stuff, I'm sure you've heard her name. And I was in anthropology as a whole, but I focused on forensics. And then I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Louisiana in Lafayette, and I had a dual major between criminal justice and anthropology, and I dabbled in some chemistry, mainly because I thought I was going to do med school, and that didn't pan out as much as I thought it was going to. found my true love in anthropology, and I hope y'all can find it too. My research, primarily for grad school, instead of studying skeletal remains, which is what a lot of people do for their research, I actually studied the people that did this research. So I looked primarily at cognitive biases. And so how Ashley was talking about how a lot of times scientific fields like to tout how objective they are and things like that. I really delved into that and tried to see, are there cognitive biases that creep through what is objective science? Hint, hint, it is yes. And so I primarily focused on that. And then more recently, since starting with the DPAA, I have really started to dabble back into my chemistry side and have gone into isotope research to try to help with decommingling, which is just a really fancy word to say you have a bunch of people and bunch of parts of people, and you have to try to figure out which one's, person one, person two, etc. Try to segregate those remains into discrete people, and doing that via isotopes. I have a lot of random interest that I haven't quite done research in, more just like personal exploration, but not written research like a lot of academics do. But I primarily do a lot of casework. Pretty much it's all I do day in and day out is casework. And then I have dabbled in some cultural resource management. So I dipped my toe into the archaeology side, being able to actually go out into the field and do those types of excavations or digging to see if you can find remains or find anything that would showcase that there was someone or something there at that time. So any funerary objects or other things like that. But yeah, that's pretty much me, but I can toss it on over to Jenna.
All right, hello. I am Jenna McCrae, otherwise known affectionately as Jenna Mac. I am actually completing my master's degree tomorrow. So I will graduate tomorrow from the University of Toronto with an evolutionary anthropology degree. My research was also focused in forensic anthropology. I mostly focused my efforts towards identifying gender on the skeleton. So you may hear on Bones or in all those various shows, they say the shape of the eye orbit says it's male. I'm trying to look outside of that. And to Ashley's point, I'm trying to see how we can identify how a person lived and what their lived gender was. So I was looking at evidence of wearing high heels using radiographs. My undergraduate degree was actually at the University of Western Ontario. And I was doing that in rehabilitation sciences. So I've always really loved studying people and the way that people work. And I just kind of switched on over to the way that people lived and then how I can see that when they die. I've always really loved helping people, and I love the idea of bringing loved ones home to their people. I'm probably the babiest of the group here in terms of my expertise in forensic anthropology. I have been on a handful of cases, so real field work, but I'm just working to figure out what my next stages are.
Sounds good. And Jenna actually works with me. We're both in the exact same lab. So I've tried to take her under my wing and tried to show her some things.
And she's done very well.
So actually, that does bring me up to bring up a question. And it's the purpose of this particular episode. We've talked a lot about forensic anthropology, how we are forensic anthropologists, what we do, how we do things. But we didn't answer the question, what is forensic anthropology? Now, I know there's the Wikipedia answer. We study someone's bones and try to find out their ancestry and their sex and their stature and their height, what we call the bioprofile. We try to understand who that person is biologically and what happened to them. But what is forensic anthropology really beyond the Wikipedia? What do you think?
I like to think of forensic anthropology as the science's closest connection to humanity, because depending on, what school you go to, your anthropology degree might be a BS or, Bachelor of Science, or a BA, Bachelor of Arts. And I think it really is both. I think we are a perfect mixture of, yes, science. We look at, skeletal and biological remains to try to create that type of identification. But we do so much more than just a bioprofile, more than just a trauma assessment. We really are, that speaker for the individual who died, and being able to tell, the last moments before they died and who they were as a person. And you really get to know the humanity in that skeletal assemblage and in that person, and being able to showcase that to the world. So I really enjoy forensic anthropology, and that's what I always like to remind myself when I work casework, that it is not just, your Halloween plastic skeleton that you're looking at and thinking cool things, but really this is someone's loved one, and it really is your connection to that humanity and to the cultures around you that is really important for forensic anthropology.
Yeah, broadly stated, to me, anthropology generally is just the study of humans. It's the study of where we came from, where we're going, what we've done, what we're doing. And forensic anthropology is the application of what we know about all of those things and how all of them interact in a person's life and in a person's death, and how we can use that information to not only identify them, but to figure out how they lived and how they died.
Yeah, see, I mean, for me, it's those things and something a little bit different. It is the science of death. It is the anthropology of death. It is the one thing that unites all people, all cultures, all nations. Not to get too dark, everybody dies. Quote
Everyone.
George Rube. Everybody dies. And our field studies death. We are the science of death. We are the anthropology of death. We are the ones who see people at their most vulnerable state, because nobody they can't speak up for themselves anymore. That's our job, is to speak up for them. Find out what happened to them. But as Jenna said, what is their lived experience? And I think that's what's changing in our field, because our field for the longest time was just that pure methodological, what do we have on the table? And now when you start to see effectively what is our generation of anthropologists, we're asking, no, what is the lived experience of that person?
What made that person
That's the
that person?
best way to help them. What were you saying, Jenna?
Just like what made that person, you know?
Yeah.
Thinking of
What
them.
makes that person that person? What makes them unique? What makes them them?
Mm.
And why is it we want to erase it in death? We can't erase it in death. So I think that is our ultimate goal. Now, we can't ignore some of the stuff that we've done in history, the bio profile and things like that, but we do have to expand on what we do. And that ultimately is forensic anthropology. That's something that I'm trying to do, and a lot of other people are trying to do. We want to bring back the anthropology in forensic anthropology.
Right.
Bring back the human.
Forensics is just a descriptor. We are
Yeah.
anthropologists first. And
It
we
is.
do forensic anthropology because, you know, there's laws and legalities behind it, which is what totes it as forensic. But really, we are anthropologists first. And being able to put our, you know, our little anthropology hat on first is really important. And then forensics is just that feather in the cap instead of the entire hat.
Mhm.
For lack of a better metaphor.
No, that was a great metaphor.
It is a great metaphor, and it brings me to, you know, the next thing. It's just a thought in my head. I recall when I first got started in a professional organization. It's called the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. It's one of the largest forensic science organizations in the world. As a matter of fact, Stephanie and I are both members of that organization. And when I got started as a student affiliate in 2011, we were debating as a section to drop the term physical anthropology and just go with anthropology. That's our section name now, is we're the anthropology section. The debate centered around, well, who can say they are a member of this section? Are we going to allow sociocultural anthropologists into forensic anthropology, into the anthropology section? And I have to ask, what's wrong with that? What is wrong with collaborating with and partnering with the sociocultural side of things? And, you know, for an academic like myself, you know, the people on the other end of the hall that are teaching what I call squishy theory. Why can't we get involved with them? Why can't we discuss them? Why can't we incorporate more theory in forensic anthropology?
Oh,
More
agreed.
multidisciplinary, the better.
It is anthropology is a multidisciplinary field. It's a multidisciplinary science and social science. And I think forensic anthropology has sort of gotten away from that. And so we're trying to bring it back, or we should try to bring it back.
I definitely think there are quite a few people in the field that are trying to, you know, reel it back in and be like, remember, like, all methods are based in theory. And so just, you know, ignoring the fact that there's theory that is just entrenched in everything we do is bad science. Like, you know, you have to really keep your mind open to, well, not only what method am I choosing to do my casework, but why am I choosing this method? What is the theory behind this method? Is that theory logical and sound, and does it stand up to, you know, the standards that we set for ourselves in the field? And all of those things are really important because they will shape your answer. So your conclusion is really shaped by the world around you because people are shaped by the world around you. And so trying to ignore that theory really does yourself a disservice, and then does the people you're serving your casework, because realistically we are serving our cases and, you know, trying to ID and things like that. And if you try to ignore those things, you're also doing a disservice to your casework and to those people that, you know, you're trying to give back to their loved ones.
And that's who we deal with. That's our whole mission, is reuniting the deceased with their loved ones, whether that is their biological family or their chosen family. It is to put a name and a life to a set of remains, to a skeleton.
Right. It's giving an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's giving them answers.
Because a lot of times, you know, once it gets to the point that forensic anthropologists are looking at our casework and at these remains, they've been dead for quite a while. So the families might think they're still missing. They might, you know, assume that they're, you know, dead, but have not found remains, so have no answers. There's that ambiguous loss that is just perpetuating their lives, that they don't have that answer. And it's really hard to start a grieving process when you don't have an answer. And so forensic anthropologists, part of our job is to try to give that answer. And I know, at least for myself with the work that I do, it's also sometimes explaining, well, where was, you know, my grandpa or my great uncle or whoever was in the war? Where did they die? What were they doing? How did they die? Because a lot of those things aren't known. And so giving that type of answer is really a start to closure for a lot of people.
And what you do is actually very important, not just for the sort of individualistic trying to deal with the families, but if you think about American culture, you and the work that your colleagues do actually fulfills part of what I would call the American ethos, particularly when it comes to our service people. And that is, we leave no one behind. As a country, we try to leave no one behind. And your mission is to leave no one behind.
No
and
human gets left behind.
What?
No human gets left behind.
Yep. No human gets left behind. And that sort of, you can think about it by looking at, just look at CNN. I mean, it feels like once a month, once every other month, there's a news story where your outfitter, the DPAA, has identified somebody and brought them home to their families. Now, that's fulfilling sort of a national sort of a cultural aspect to it, because it's fulfilling that need that, hey, we have found another one, we are not leaving them behind.
And I think it's also, I mean, it's very easy for a lot of people to connect to that as far as military is concerned, because it is often, you know, a saying of no man left behind for military. But I think all of forensic anthropology, I think a lot of us think that way of our casework and the people that we are studying and trying to identify. We don't want to leave them behind either. And so I know the, you know, boards, the board certification for forensic anthropology has like Instagrams and other things like that. They often will showcase cold cases that, you know, hadn't been able to be ID'd because, you know, science is always progressing and trying to get better. And forensic anthropologist and new science has helped to identify someone who their case has been cold for 20 years. And so it's not just UPAA and it's not just military, but it really is no one left behind for all of us. And forensic anthropology is not just the US. You know, we have forensic anthropologists worldwide, and I think a lot of us think that way of I'm not going to leave my casework behind because this is someone's loved one. This is someone's someone. And you can't just ignore that. And so having that, at least for myself, that's why I really gravitated more towards forensic anthropology instead of going back to med school, was because of that. Is you don't, like, we are the study of death, and you don't want, like, death isn't the end. Like, it
No.
might have been the end for, someone's breathing, living life, but it is not the end of their story. It is not the end of their legacy on the world. And I feel like a lot of times for forensic anthropology, being able to make those identifications and tell their story, it's sharing their legacy and furthering themselves, and so they don't end.
Yeah.
At least
Some of the
Yeah.
work we do as well is just recovering individuals. If you think of a house fire, when somebody perishes in a house fire, somebody may want to come home to that house. And one of the important jobs that we have is making sure that we recover all of that individual's remains so that they can be laid to rest however the family wants to lay them to rest, and just ensuring that not only does no human get left behind, but no, to the best of our abilities, no part of that human will be left behind.
Yeah. I mean, and here in Ontario, we deal with Indigenous remains from time to time. What we call here in Canada First Nations, and that is a very big part of the various different nations' culture. Is even the tiniest little finger bone is person, and you don't leave it behind. And you're right, Stephanie. It permeates not just at the DPAA; it permeates all throughout. I am a consultant with a nonprofit organization called Please Bring Me Home. The whole purpose of the organization is to sort of investigate and search for cold case missing persons. And my job is to go through whatever they find and to see, yeah, we may have someone here. And trying to help those investigators figure out where they should search and where they shouldn't search. And it's a fantastic organization. It is a fantastic organization. If you're in Canada, you should really look them up. It's called Please Bring Me Home.
You can volunteer with them.
You can volunteer with them. You can volunteer with them, surely. All right. Does anybody have anything they want to add?
I guess, just to try to liven things up a bit, because while we are the study of death, sometimes that can get a little sad and depressing and dark, right? Sometimes it can be really, really cool and fascinating, and obviously a little morbid. So if you have a morbid sense of humor, you probably will love it here. But you also, as forensic anthropologists, every case is different because every person is different. And so you get to see so many cool things about the human body that you might not have known, where, like, you could have studied. I mean, I went through a lot of school, they went through a lot of school, and still I feel like every time I, open a new case, I learn something new about the human body, which is always really fascinating. Just seeing all the different intricacies of people and how even, at least for the cases that I work on, it's a pretty homogenous group, because if you think World War II, it's a lot of 18 to 25-year-old white guys, right? But even in that really homogenous group, you see so much variability in the human skeleton, which is super fascinating. And so I know I really enjoy being able to see that. And then also, let's be real, if you tuned into the podcast called The Bone Club, you probably really like CSI, you like your crime shows. We deal with a lot of trauma, and not just like, oh, the trauma that caused the person's death, but like trauma that happened beforehand. So like I've seen cases where there's massive blunt force trauma to the head, so essentially got hit with something big and hard enough for it to have affected your cranium, and they live to tell the tale, right? It healed over and everything's fine, and they kept on living. And that really just shows the resiliency of mankind as well, because you can go through so much and still live to tell the tale. And then while obviously everyone dies, and that's how you ended up on our tables, but now we get to tell your tales, and that's also a really important, fascinating thing for me, at least.
Well, as a person I was talking to last week was saying, we are very special people because we're not accountants. It's not the same job day in and day out. Every day is a new thing. Every day is a new adventure. Every case is unique. Every scene is unique. So if you're somebody who wants structure, but at the same time doesn't want the same thing over and over and over and over again, consider forensic anthropology.
Yeah.
Plus, we're some pretty cool people. Trust us, we're some pretty cool people.
You also get to do some pretty wild and epic things sometimes where, you know, you might get called out for a recovery and have to climb a mountainside. And I've never climbed a mountainside, so you get to learn a new skill. Or, you know, just this morning I was digging a hole in the middle of somewhere else. So it's like, you never really know what the job's going to make you do. So you always kind of have to be on your toes a little bit, which is really fun. But then you get to see so much and also interact with the world around you, in just ways that you probably wouldn't have, you know, being an accountant or being, you know, other different types of jobs. I know I've been volunteering. So I live on Oahu, and I've been volunteering with some organizations in a city not too far from where I'm currently at, and trying to find iwi kapuna, which is essentially ancestors, and trying to be able to repatriate and rebury them in a proper way, and being able to work with the cultures around you, and like being able to learn so much more that I probably would never have learned in a random other day job, right? You don't get yourself in those weird sticky situations as an accountant, or even when I wanted to do med school, even as a doctor, you probably won't get yourself in those types of situations, and you really get to learn so much about the world around you, which then helps you learn about yourself a little bit as well, because being able to see that variability and seeing the culture differences really just shows you not only how similar everyone is to each other, but how different everyone is, and how beautiful that can be, at least for myself.
Yeah, and then you also have the slight element of danger. Going to work at a fire scene from a house that is less than secure, and it's minus 25 degrees Celsius. We're getting below 0 Fahrenheit. It's fun.
Steel toes free.
Really is fun.
So I might leave those for you. I'm not a fan of the cold.
That's why you're in Hawaii.
But yeah,
I think the funniest thing about this field too is like the one of the things that we say is dead people don't talk back. But I've never learned so much about, like, I did an undergrad in a degree in alive people, and I've never learned so much about people as I have in studying them in depth. And I feel like that's just the craziest thing about this. And at the end of the day, no matter who you are or what you do or where you came from, everybody is just bones. At the end of it, we're all just the same. We're skin, sacks, and bones. And it's humbling. It's humbling to realize that we're all very unique and also so very much the same.
Agreed.
There are other squishy bits in there too, besides skin sacks.
Yeah, the occasional squishy part.
The squishy bits are not the stuff I like either.
Not the stuff we like.
They're not the Halloween decorations.
I'll stay away from my fleshy bits.
Yeah.
Though I will take fleshy bits over hair and nails. That's never been my the thing that I love.
I love the fleshy bits. One of the things I have gotten into, it was my undergrad. My master's program was actually in a department of anatomy, so we had to do a lot of the gross anatomy stuff. I've been a teaching assistant, and I actually started out as one of the course instructors for our forensic anatomy course here. And I love anatomy. I love soft tissue anatomy. It's absolutely fascinating. But I'll say the bones are best.
I'm fascinated, and yet
best.
I have a stank face the entire time I do autopsies.
Yep.
But I'm like, oh, that's so
Autopsies
cool.
are neat.
This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Yeah, an autopsy.
No, I find them fascinating. It's just watching an autopsy on somebody who is rather decomposed where you want to go, I'll stand on the other side of the air conditioning.
I would say I'll take the smell of decomp over the smell of burned remains, because let's be real, it just smells like fried chicken, and that just feels weird.
No,
like
not fried
people
chicken.
People shouldn't smell
Barbecue.
like food.
Oh, our good job is so glamorous, isn't it?
You know you are good for this field when you can come back from a fire scene and say, I'm hungry.
Yep.
Or when you can be on a fire scene and eat a meat lover's pizza, no problem.
Yeah. Didn't you do that?
Yeah. It felt very dark, but I enjoyed it. It's a really good pizza.
You do have to have a slightly dark sense of humor. I mean, when you deal
Yes,
with
you
death
do.
all day long, obviously there are some traumas that go along with it, and for a lot of us, trauma response, humor.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't find a way, and we'll actually probably discuss and have a episode where we talk about these traumas, but yeah, if you don't have a way to deal with it, you are destined for the grippy socks factory.
Hard to stay out either way, but
Right.
So I think we've just about covered what forensic anthropology is. I want to thank you all for listening to us today. Our next episode will be in about a month from now, and it'll be on job prospects in forensic anthropology. It's something that I've come to appreciate greatly as I'm coming to my end. Jenna is right at her end, and she's debating whether or not to go into the field or go into academia as a PhD student. So, and Stephanie went right into the field.
Oh yeah, went straight to
work. Straight to work. So we're going to discuss next time the various different job prospects. How do you actually get into this field? What are some things that you can do? And we're going to do it from a more realistic perspective. This isn't necessarily going to be a rah-rah selling point, but something you should consider if you're seriously considering this field. So again, I want to thank you all. If you want to reach us, we do have some ways for you to reach us. We have an email account, which is boneclubpodcast@gmail.com. That's boneclubpodcast@gmail.com. And we're also on Instagram and Threads as @the Bone Club Podcast. That's @the Bone Club Podcast.
Yep. So if you weren't scared away by the fleshy bits talk, or the burned remains talks, or the whatever else we decided to throw at you today, I mean, join the Bone Club.
Join the Bone Club.
Join us.
All right. So for myself, Stephanie, and Jenna, we want to thank you, and we'll see you next month.
See you next time.